There's something special about a childhood adventure. 4 years ago, I revisited one, proving to myself that rose-tinted glasses will forever colour memories, and that sometimes the best way to preserve them is to update them.
Since then, I've had one major request, and today I'm going to be tackling that game. Or should I say, I'm tackling that particular generation of Pokemon, with Gold version.
I'll openly state that I played a lot more of this crop of Pokemon games as a kid than I did the first. It may have been that my Pokemon Red was, for a while, stolen before I recovered it years later, or it may have been that I had 2 younger brothers and this was the one generation all 3 of us actively played somewhat simultaneously. Either way, I'm definitely more familiar with it compared to Generation 1. We've got 100 new Pokemon to see since last time, so let's get to it.
However, if you think that means I'm going to be any less critical to this than I was to Red in 2016, have you watched the show before?
To business! And to the adventure.
Because it's not exactly like I can leave the house right now and go on a real adventure. Or can I?
Is that an essential journey?
Maybe.
Adam.
Just like its predecessor, the game starts with an introduction to the world. Like, almost the exact same introduction to the world. After naming my avatar, it's off to...
You're off to see the wizard!
No, it's off to see the professor. Again, it echoes the last game, but with a little twist. There's no rival arguing with you, and it's not a coming-of-age story. Instead, Professor Elm here wants you to run an errand. Okay, fetch quest, but it's at least plot essential. And that's the thing, this game tries much harder than its predecessor to actually have a plot that carries throughout the game, rather than something that dies off halfway through.
I decided that my starter shall be the Grass-type Chikorita because it's a personal favourite, and that I shall nickname it something tasteful. Subtle too.
This is the start of the game's main theme. Familiar, but with extra steps. Instead of the fetch quest with Oak's Pokédex, the initial rival encounter, and getting your first partner all being separate, it's now rolled into one major plot thread, peaking after the character talks to Mr. Pokemon. Immediately after, here is the new rival, and unlike Blue, who was just calculating, this guy is power obsessed and absolutely brutal towards his Pokemon. So, what should we name him?
Power hungry, easy to hate, but you're oddly compelled by him. Red and black colour scheme.
I bet he fed his parents to tigers.
Now I've kind of glossed over it, but eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed that it's now dark in-game. Now that is one of the many new mechanics in play.
Like I said before, the sequel wanted to be familiar, but also different enough to stand out. And one of the ways it does this is with a real-time clock. There's both a day and a night cycle, and certain events only happen on certain days of the week. It's a really neat feature, and something that adds a lot of depth to the world.
That's a big thing that was touted in the build-up to Gen 2. The world at hand had a ton more depth than Red and Blue ever did.
After the battle, the game immediately teases another new mechanic. Eggs, which come to fruition later on. See, now you can breed your Pokemon, for both competitive and Pokédex use. The one you are given turns out to be one of the new Pokemon, Togepi, which for once I will actually use on a playthrough.
I have this thing I do that outside of a few staple favourites, I try to use different Pokemon each time I play through one of these games, especially with Generation 2 and 3. A review of the latter, of course, you'll have to wait 4 years for.
At this point in the review, I'm going to gloss over a lot of the plot elements because, frankly, there's a lot. And I'm going to reiterate my focus on the new mechanics that ended up becoming staples, plus some that ended up never returning, like the phone mechanic.
Yes, I know. It sort of came back in Pokemon Emerald, okay? You can stop typing that comment now. Just go down there and hit the like button instead. Yeah? Good.
Besides the Pokédex, you get the Pokénav as a secondary helper item. It brings, among many features, the aforementioned phone. The way this works is that after battle, certain trainers will ask to add you as a contact and will randomly phone you, either just to chat, ask to battle, or rarely inform you of a rare Pokemon appearing in a certain area. It's great in theory, but in practice you get a lot of unwanted calls.
Seriously, you'd think these people are moonlighting as Microsoft support.
Speaking of rare Pokemon appearing, certain things only appear during daylight and certain things only appear during the nighttime, reiterating the newfound world depth. Finally, another new mechanic worth highlighting is hold items. Simply put, you can give a Pokemon an item to hold that will help it in battle, be it a berry to restore health, an item to boost attack, or something with a very specific effect, like the Quick Claw. Speaking of, now's a good time to introduce another party member, Puddles the Wooper turned Quagsire.
And also, your new Messiah!
Rounding out, we have Nibbles the Zubat. Now I want to bring particular attention here, because this is something neat. Several returning Pokemon got made new again with a new evolution. Zubat here would initially only evolve into Golbat, but now, thanks to a new hidden happiness mechanic, after a while it will now evolve into Crobat, a Pokemon that, besides being, actually a pretty cool design, has held a competitive edge for years in the PvP scene.
Yes, I'm playing the game against itself here, but for good reason.
Finishing off the team, there's Beavis the Magmar, and Sean, the clearly from Australia sheep-inspired Mareep that ends up as an electric kangaroo. My goal, as usual, is to tick off type coverage, since this is a Pokemon game and the giant rock, paper, scissors tussle can easily break a team. So we've got grass, water, fire, electric, a flyer, and a tactical pick on board.
Well, there is another tactical pick here, but more on that later.
Much like the last games, the aim is to go around the land taking on the various gym leaders and collecting all 8 badges, with a side plot thrown in here and there to spice things up. Now, in this particular version, the main subplot is the attempted resurgence of Team Rocket. Yeah, those bozos again. Leaderless after their boss disappeared 3 years prior, various members are trying to regroup and reform to lure Giovanni out of hiding. The problem is, however, that their plots are, well, for the most part, their plots are small time. That's not to say they aren't evil. The first time you bump into them just before the second gym, they're harvesting Slowpoke tails. Like actually cutting off and selling the tails of Slowpokes.
That's pretty hardcore for what's widely considered to be a kid's game. Like, imagine if the next time you popped in Super Mario Bros., it started with Bowser enacting a genocide on the Mushroom Kingdom. Though I'm not gonna lie to you, I would probably play the hell out of that.
Sadly, like the first game, they sort of vanish for a bit. Unlike the first game, there is no Giovanni, and the bulk of the plot revolves around your rival and his treatment of his Pokemon, and the outside forces constantly telling him to treat all living things with kindness and respect, which he outright rejects. He's also got a thing against Team Rocket for some reason, but that's never actually explained in this version of the game.
I know in the manga, he's revealed to be Giovanni's son, which would have been a great plot twist for the game should they have introduced that. Oh, speaking of the manga, back in the Gen 1 review, I made a joke about Team Rocket being involved as Shadow Masters in the Pokemon League system somehow. So as it turns out, there is a manga about exactly that, and at the time of writing that video, I didn't know about it. Since then, of course, everybody has told me about it, so I'm going to put this to bed once and for all. Yes, I've seen it now. Yes, I've read it now. Please stop telling me about it. Please stop bugging me on Twitter about it. Just go back to telling me that I'm wrong about Sonic Adventure or something. By the way, Sonic Adventure sucks. Deal with it.
It's a shame, since the Rocket storyline does tie into yet another new mechanic, or rather another new feature that was introduced this generation. You may have heard of shiny Pokemon before. Very rare encounters with Pokemon of a different than standard colour, and that was first introduced in this generation of games. They have roughly a 1 in 8,192 chance of appearing every time you encounter a Pokemon, but there is one guaranteed chance to catch one in the form of a red Gyarados. Its appearance is part of one of the more interesting Team Rocket plots, in which they forced all of the Magikarp in Johto's famous Lake of Rage to evolve using a rogue radio signal.
Now, I sense that you want to ask me if I found any others besides the red Gyarados. Did I? Find out.
The Lake of Rage plot, now I think about it, continues Red and Blue's themes of the no matter the cost attitude of Team Rocket. They're trying to get the Magikarp to evolve because Gyarados are, and I quote, big bucks. It also introduces Lance, the Dragon Master, previous leader of the Elite Four and now its champion, investigating the shenanigans in between title defending bouts.
Introducing the champion early is a plot element that will be continually reused in the future games, most notably in Generation 4 with Cynthia. Cynthia would go on to be one of the most popular champions because of her design. Yeah, her design.
Somber mood aside, a new problem starts to rear its head the further into the game you get, and that's the level gap. Throughout the game, I've been trying to balance my team's levels in order to not find myself in a bind. As it turns out, this would be incredibly detrimental, especially once I hit the final gym. For whatever reason, Claire, the princess to the Dragon Master throne, has a big level jump from the past cluster of leaders. The last 4, no joke, have all been within a few levels of each other, but then Claire just rides on in and will absolutely wring you out if you aren't ready. And I'll be honest, I won on sheer nonsense.
This gave me a grim realization and one of the biggest flaws in this game. I was going to have to grind out some levels before taking on the Elite Four.
After dealing with the final Rocket plot, an underwhelming coup on the radio tower in Goldenrod, which apparently was their master stroke, I found myself having to bring the pace of the story to an absolute halt while I got my entire party up to snuff. This was not going to be good.
Nor was it the first time I'd have to do it. However, after 6 straight hours of grinding, I managed to squeak past the Elite Four.
What's notable about this group is that, again, just like the gym leaders of Johto before them, all of their Pokemon's levels kinda cluster in the 40s. With a balanced team like mine, I'll be honest, they really weren't too hard, even with the new faces and the new types. Champion Lance, however, would prove to be a headache.
Or at least he would, until a derp-faced king arrived on the scene.
Quagsire. Mother-loving, son of a biscuit-eating bulldog, stupid-faced, part water, part ground Quagsire! With the dumbest, plainest face and the most boring design of anything I've ever seen, became an absolute beast in this battle! Truly an MVP, and it's because of 2 very amusing reasons. See, unlike Gen 1, speed lends 0 favour to critical hits. The real king in these games are 2 things.
1 is conditions, poison, paralysis, confusion, all of that jazz. The second is stab.
No, I don't mean the purple-shirted man from Cyanide and Happiness. I mean same type attack bonus. It's been a mechanic in every Pokemon game, giving a 50% power increase to moves of the same type as the user, but in this generation forward, Ground and Water saw moves like Earthquake and Surf significantly buffed. and this bastard here just so happens to be dual ground and water type, meaning that the usual base 100 attack power of Earthquake is now 150. That's the same as Hyper Beam, without having to wait a turn to recover afterwards. Lance, the champion of Johto, kneecapped by something that looks like a 4-year-old drew it.
I'm so proud of that. That's such a good drawing you've done. I'm going to put this right here on the fridge, and you know what? Every time we have someone new over, they're going to see that. First thing they see in the kitchen. What do you think?
Normally, we'd be done. The credits are rolling, so it's time to reflect on our adventure, right? Well, in this case, no. Gold and Silver introduced the idea of post-game content, with the game continuing after the main story wraps up. And to be honest, it's never been quite as well done as it has in these games. For a start, since you've conquered Johto, now you can go back to Kanto, the region next door, which just so happens to be the original red and blue setting, and there's 8 more gym badges to go along with it. Now, this sounds great on paper, but there's an issue. Everyone, barring the final gym leader, is again clustered around the same handful of levels.
This is leading up to a major problem.
Grinding. Since every leader and trainer was all around the 40s to mid-50s, my team was woefully underleveled, and at this point the game sets up your final challenge. Upon reaching Cinnabar Island, which is now a pile of magma after a volcanic eruption, you bump into no other than Blue, the OG rival. He's now the final gym leader of Kanto, and after you deal with his colleagues, he'll grant you the right to battle him.
Bow down before him and be grateful that you can breathe the same air as he, peasant.
All jokes aside, he's still very bitter about his loss to Red, right as he took the title of Elite Four champion. Yet, he has respect for his rival. This battle is quite a challenge, but it's not too bad as long as you play the type game. It's a nice moment, and it teases the final test, but it sort of just, well, I'll be honest, it kind of announces it. Like, literally, hey buddy, here's Red, go to Mount Silver. The literal last area of the game you don't unlock until you've gotten all 16 badges. Have fun!
It's pretty anticlimactic. The fight, however, is...
In the deepest chamber of Mount Silver waits Red. Yes, this is supposed to be the main protagonist from the first games, albeit a very specific version from one of the many manga series.
And he will shake you to your core.
This is, by far, the hardest battle in nearly any Pokemon game to date. Red's team is designed to beat you down with type coverage, stab moves, and stalling in a way that has been rarely replicated since. And I'll be honest with you, I went in the first time absolutely and totally unprepared, and time again, Red turned me into a fine paste. And I realized quickly, it's because he has an average 20 level lead over Blue, and 30 levels over any of the Pokemon in the Kanto gyms. To put it bluntly, the game woefully underprepared me and ramped everything up at the last second. I'll be honest, it soured the experience for me, because, yet again, I was out and about grinding my guys up. This time I didn't bother recording it, so here is some stock video of something more interesting.
I'll be honest, I don't have any footage of me grinding this time. I resolved I would turn the recording back on if I found a shiny, which I obviously didn't. Yeah, we can stop this whole charade. I'm sorry, I led you on. I'm no better than your high school crush.
From 50 to 55. It doesn't sound like much, and I'll be honest, I didn't think it was going to be enough. But damn it, these 5 levels times 6 Pokemon took me hours to grind out, and I'd actually quietly been engineering this team to deal with this fight since the beginning. with a specific team member designated a specific target on his team to deal with.
However, that totally fell apart.
This was a crash course in managing chaos. Using both a little RNG and some status conditions, I could consistently take out Red's Pikachu, Venusaur, Espeon, and Blastoise, but I'd continually get tanked out by the Snorlax. I debated grinding some more, but I had noticed before in my initial attempts that only one team member was able to land significant enough blows on the behemoth for it to stop him from recovering his health. Puddles. If there is an RNGesus, I praise his name to the highest order. First, Quagsire came for Lance. Now, it came for Red, as somehow it took out 4 of his 6 Pokemon with that powered up Earthquake. Naturally, it couldn't have done it alone, and confusing certain enemies with Nibbles was an absolute necessary assist, but the real game changer was the final blow.
I touched briefly earlier on hold items, and I want to highlight one right now. See, Quagsire is quite slow as a Pokemon. Its base speed stat, I want to say, is 35. To counteract this, I'd given it a Quick Claw, an item which, once in a while, will let the holder move first, regardless if it's the slower Pokemon or not.
And now, in my moment of need, out came Surf. First, on Red's final card, his Charizard. I'd done it. I'd beaten the hardest trainer in all of the franchise. Stunned doesn't even start to sum up my emotions.
It is 11:50. This is my... I just did it. I lost all data grinding. I think Quagsire is one of my new favorite Pokemon, by the way, after all this. Holy shit. I hear Quagsire plushie or something. Torchic, you're out.
I must admit, this was a lot more fun to revisit and replay than Pokemon Red was. There's just so much more content and so much more world building in Generation 2 than there was in Generation 1. And that final battle, while incredibly frustrating, was a fun little test of wit, a great final challenge, and something that hasn't really been done since. There's been attempts at it, sure, like Steven in Pokemon Emerald, but it's never quite had that same impact.
And by tons of content, there's stuff I didn't even talk about yet, like the roaming legendary dogs that randomly appear in the wild, the baby Pokemon, Dark and Steel types, the random events.
Now, that said, do I recommend playing the original releases of these games in 2020? And the answer is, frankly, no, for 2 very good reasons. The first one is just a hardware reason. These old games do use batteries to save your data, and the problem is over time those batteries will die. It's a relatively simple procedure to perform to replace these batteries, but it's kind of a pain in the neck. Now, I know, emulation exists, and it kind of defeats the point, but if you're a lover of playing games on their original hardware like me, then it's just another annoying obstacle. The second reason I don't recommend it is that remakes do exist, and they're pretty darn good.
Heart Gold and Soul Silver took everything about these games and updated them with the vastly superior Generation 4 battle system, added all of the new Pokemon up until that point, streamlined many aspects, and also mixed in the extended plot found in the Crystal version of these games. Plus, they saved to onboard flash memory, which will never randomly die on you. Plus, you can transfer everything to the newer titles. I'll be honest, play this instead.
Gonna change the pace a little tiny bit for the final statement before I wrap the video up. As I'm recording this, we are currently in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. You may be wondering what that's got to do with anything. I'm going to be honest with you. Besides the obvious reason of I was stuck in the house and needed something to do without going insane in quarantine, this was going to be a video I did about now anyway. Good friends of mine, Devon and Ale, they actually were supposed to be getting married at the end of April, and this was going to be a wedding present of sort. Devon has been a pretty big supporter of this channel for a very long time. He's always been retweeting stuff on Twitter, he's always been sharing it around, and he's just been a very good friend. So obviously they've had to postpone their wedding, and there's a real lot of nasty stuff's gone on. I feel for them, I really do. So I'm gonna make a very simple request. Inside the description you'll find a few links. There's going to be a link to Ali's Etsy page, her art commissions post, because she is an artist and does take commissions, and there's also going to be a link to both their Twitters. If you don't want to go to the Etsy page and buy anything, if you don't want to commission any art, that's fine. Just take their Twitters, send them a nice, encouraging message. Just be positive on the internet for once. It sucks the world got put on hold, it really does, and again, I'm just going to say it again, I really do feel for them, because I can only imagine how hard that must have been to postpone their wedding. Yeah. Now, that out of the way, that's one major review that I've been requested to do for a very long time, particularly by Devon. There's two other games which I'm currently holding. These two games, to be specific, which I've also had heavily requested. Tell you what, I'll strike you guys a deal. Get wherever they move the subscriber number to next, get that number over 1,000, and we'll talk about this one. I didn't mean to drop that. But yeah, we'll talk about this one. Good night.